And of course, no man can pay back God, because God's honor is infinite and man is finite. So the answer is you have to get God to pay God back. In other words, you have to get Christ to pay God back on the cross. And this is what the West often means when it talks about redemption, which in the English word always connotes very much the idea of buying off. St. Paul uses it in the sense of buying a slave's freedom. This is what redemption means. But in the Greek word means litrosis. It means liberation. It means freedom. It doesn't have quite the same monetary, mercenary, quid pro quo connotation.
In their mind, God must kill God in order to appease God. And if you think about the kind of God they must believe in, a God that would demand the death of himself in order to appease him, his own honor.
It makes no sense logically when you really look at it that way. And it's quite horrifying when you look at it in this kind of a very simple, honest way. And it's entirely different from what the fathers are talking about and what the prophets, as you say, and the saints in the Old and New Testament are talking about. They're talking about something which transforms man basically, so that you don't have this whole problem of a gulf between God and man, whatever it is.
As Athanasius said, God became man in order to unite humanity to himself, to bring it into himself through the person of Jesus Christ, and to cleanse it, to transform it, and then each individual Christian then, by purifying himself and uniting himself to Christ, then begins to share in all the attributes of Christ. That's why the scriptures talk repeatedly about us sitting on the throne with Christ, about us, being called his brothers and his sisters. These are terms which that we're now the adopted sons of God. These are all terms which describe a different kind of God, a loving God, a God that pardons and forgives and even brings
changes
and brings us into communion with him.
And is apparently going to make us almost equal to him, you see. Whereas in the West, this idea that we're going to become equal with God at God's behest, and because we are changed in a twinkling of an eye, and so on and so forth, all those wonderful quotes in the Bible and so on, is almost anathema to the West.
Because
it's just horrifying.
Because it also interferes with their political agenda.
Well, this is originally what it did, but nowadays, of course, the political agenda has been completed. And they have other little agendas, unfortunately, in mind, and of keeping people, unfortunately, within the control of their religious systems, not politically. And so they use this idea to create a kind of a gap for man with guilt.
Well, maybe that's what he means when he goes on to say, many such students of the Bible become fundamentalists and at times quite dangerous. He also says, on the other hand, the critical biblical scholar who uses whatever tools he has at his disposal to understand the Bible cannot complete this task unless he knows the existence of the sickness of religion and its cure, and indeed in a Bible which is supposed to be his specialty. This holds especially true for those Orthodox scholars who do not know that an Old and New Testament term for theosis is glorification.
In fact, this is one of Father John's criticisms of those that translate the Scriptures, is that many times there are passages which clearly talk about glorification in the Greek text, in which they've obscured the meaning of them.
Because it seems as though the words were chosen very carefully.
Yes. And they translate them in such a way that reading them in English, you won't come to a full understanding of what the Greek is actually trying to say. And see, and that's and I don't think that that's unintentional. I think that there's probably a little bit of
well, who knows how intentional or unintentional it is. Unfortunately, in some cases it may be intentional. In other cases, it's unintentional because they're so used to this kind of thinking. And it's an application of the present social order onto something which is supposed to totally transform it. It's putting the cart before the horse. It's instead of transforming man and transforming therefore the social order so that it's something holy and something good. On the other hand, it's taking the social order, which is in a miserable state and has been that way all along, and it doesn't look like it's getting much better, backwards, and trying to
and changing the theology to fit that,
yeah,
rather than sort of bringing God down to man rather than man up to God. We don't have much time left, but can you touch upon this cure of the neurobiological sickness of religion that Professor Romanides talks about? Timothy?
Well, he mentions that there are basically 3 stages. The first stage is purification, the second stage is illumination, and the third stage is this glorification. And this again, there's a definite difference in the way the West would conceive of a cure and the way the Orthodox East conceives of it. In the Orthodox East, it requires man's participation and active effort. In the West, thanks to Augustine and his theological system, there is only the concept that man is a kind of passive recipient of grace and isn't worthy to participate, in their view, radically unworthily to participate in the cure.
In fact, the staunchest Augustinians, the most extreme Calvinists, would say that man is incapable of participating in his own salvation.
He's too degenerate.
Yes.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Timothy Fisher, Mr. Michael Halford, once again for joining us to discuss Professor John Romanides' latest essay entitled The Cure of the Neurobiological Sickness of Religion. I'm Vincent Neiman, and this is Orthodox Christian Television.
Amen.